Today we have to finish up everything that you need for the open note tests, lecture exam 3 and lab exam 3. And then the tests will open today. I think I put 2 p.m. So like towards the end of our second class, the tests will open, and you'll have almost 3 weeks to finish. You have 2.5 weeks to take them. I put a due date of May 9th. And so that's 2.5 weeks. That's at the end of dead week. I would say try to get the test done soon, because as you move closer and closer to finals week, you want to focus on finals and not on the open note tests. I think with the lab test, especially the lab test number 3 is going to be really easy. I mean, you got plenty of time to find your answers and to complete it. And so we're going to talk about that today once we get done with lab number 3. So we got to finish that up. We started lab number 3 Tuesday, and so we got to finish that up. We got to fill out the lab report. So that's what we're going to do first. During this class, in between now and 12:20, we'll finish up the lab test, complete the lab report, and then talk about the lab test. But the lab test is, I think, very easy. As long as you have everything in front of you as you're taking it, that one shouldn't be a problem at all. And so maybe try to get the lab test done this weekend, because it's not hard at all. And that way you can take a little bit more time on the lecture test, because it is going to be a little bit more difficult as far as making sure that you have enough time to do everything. And so the lab test, let's finish up the lab. So if I go into lab right here and go into lab module 3, we've got this third lab left to finish, digestive anatomy. And then I'll show you guys this stuff right here, and then you can take that. Then in the 1 o'clock class, we'll do chapter 26, which is digestive physiology, and then that'll be done. And the lecture test will also open up today, and you can get those done over the course of the next 2.5 weeks or so. And then next week we're going to cover new material on reproductive and development, and then you get a week off, dead week, to prepare for finals, and then you'll take your final. So that's the plan. We're just about done, kind of in cruise control towards the end. So the other day we started on digestive anatomy. I'm gonna go down to the bottom though and go ahead and pull up a few things so I can show it to you after we're done. One is this checklist right here. It just kind of gives you a list of the structures you have to know and be able to identify. And then it's got some good information here that can help you answer some of the questions on the lab test. And then down here at the bottom is sort of like a flow chart. We've done these flow charts with a few different things this semester. One was blood flow. How do you get from the heart to the leg, or how do you get from the left arm to the back to the heart and stuff like that. So we've done that. And then you also had a flow chart for the urine, the path that urine takes to get from the kidneys out of the body. And this right here is what you'll see some questions similar to the blood vessel questions that you saw. You'll on this lab test coming up, lab test 3, you're going to have questions about urine flow, where you have like 2 parts, and there'll be a space that's blank, and you put the part that goes in the middle. Same thing here with the flow of food through the GI tract. You'll have questions where it'll have 2 parts of the GI tract, and then one's missing, and you got to put what goes in the middle. So this right here will help you out with that. You'll also put this on the lab report as well, because there is a question on the lab report where you do this. You trace the flow of food as it goes through. So we're going to pull that up, and we're going to look at the PowerPoint that has the pictures. And this is why I was talking about how easy the lab test is easy. If you see a picture and it says, you know, what structure is highlighted, you just go to the PowerPoint and find that picture. And so you might see like this picture right here. You might see this picture on the test, and it'll say, you know, what salivary gland is highlighted, and you can just go to this PowerPoint, find that picture, and the answer's right there at the top. So very easy. But we'll pull up the PowerPoint and look at that here in a little bit, and then the lab report. We need to fill that out, and so let's go ahead and pull that up as well. So we'll have all that stuff ready for us. But the other day we kind of got through the stomach. So we need to pick up there where the stomach is and kind of go through the rest of the GI tract. So food has made its way down to the stomach, and it enters the stomach as a ball of food called a bolus. And the stomach is where you do your protein digestion. That's where you start protein digestion. It finishes in the small intestine, but you start the protein digestion in the stomach with acid and this enzyme called pepsin, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get to chapter 26. And then you hold food in the stomach for a few hours, and that's where this sphincter muscle comes in. The last part right here, the last part of the stomach is called the pylorus region, and the word pylorus means gatekeeper, because you're going to actually stop food there and hold it in your stomach, and then you're going to release it little by little into the small intestine. You know, your stomach, because those little folds right there you see, called gastric folds, or you also hear them called rugae or rugae. Those little folds in the wall of the stomach allow it to expand a lot to accommodate large amounts of food. So your stomach can hold large amounts of food, but your small intestine, it can't receive a lot of food at once, because the small intestine is where you got to finish digestion. You got to add bile from your liver and gallbladder. You got to add pancreatic juice from your pancreas. And then you got to mix it up, and you've got to finish the chemical digestion of food. And the small intestine is also where you absorb 90% of the nutrients that you get from your food. And so you can't give the small intestine a large amount of food all at once. And so it gets stopped right here by the stomach and sort of held in the stomach by this sphincter muscle right there called the pyloric sphincter. And then it releases food little by little. Now, what's going out of the stomach is this like paste-like material called chyme. So it comes in the stomach as a bolus, like a semi-solid ball of food. And then when you break down all the proteins, it kind of makes the food lose its shape. It kind of liquefies the food into this paste called chyme. And that's what it is when it exits. And sometimes you'll hear it called acidic chyme because it's very acidic. So one of the things we have to do when the food makes its way into the small intestine, one of the things we have to do is neutralize all that acid. And so your pancreas actually produces bicarbonate to help neutralize the acids that's coming in with the chyme into the small intestine. Now, this section of the small intestine, this very first section right here, that's where food's going to enter first. And so this right here kind of starts the small intestine. That's where you finish digestion and you absorb most of the nutrients. And so what we need to do, and you see some anatomical characteristics of the small intestine, anatomical character that makes it really good at doing those things right there: the chemical digestion of food and the absorption. The finishing of the chemical digestion, your liver and your gallbladder are connected to the small intestine through what's called bile ducts, and then you have the pancreas connected to the small intestine through what we call the pancreatic duct. And so you add those substances, and then there's this back and forth blending action that happens in the small intestine, and then you start moving it through, and food's going to stay in the small intestine for a long period of time, and that allows our body to finish the digestion and absorb as much as it can. So food could spend like 12 hours just in your small intestine as it moves its way through. And one reason why is because the small intestine is extremely long. It is by far the longest part of your GI tract. In a dead person, in a living person, The length is about 3 meters because of muscle tone. Muscle tone kind of keeps it kind of tight and bunched up. But in a dead person, if you take the small intestine out, once the muscles they don't work anymore and the small intestine kind of relaxes, you can take the small intestine and stretch it out, and it will be like 22 feet long. Which, if we was in a classroom, that'd be about the length from one side of the classroom to the other. So it's a very long tube, and that ensures that the food stays in it for a long time. And then the other thing that ensures that it stays in it for a long time is all these little twists and turns that you see. That's going to slow down food as well, because just like a car can't drive around curves fast, the food has to kind of slowly move around all these turns. It can't go very fast through there, and so that right there is also going to make sure that food stays in the small intestine for a long period of time. Then if you look at the wall, the histology of the small intestine, you'll see a bunch of folds. There's these large folds. So let's kind of move down here. Let me move my camera out of the way. So you got these large folds in the wall of the small intestine, and the large folds are like kind of, if you look closely, you can kind of see them right there and right there. They're kind of like speed bumps. They kind of remind me of speed bumps in the wall of the small intestine. Those are called circular folds. So those are like large folds that you see. And then on those folds are these small projections called villi. And then on the villi, there's even smaller projections called microvilli. And so, it's basically folds on top of folds on top of folds in the inside wall. Now, what that does right there, you can see it there on the inside wall, that right there increases the surface area of the small intestine. And whenever you increase the surface area, that increases the absorption ability of a substance. That's the reason why sponges have all those little nooks and crannies, is because that increases the surface area. That's why when you look at a paper towel up close, you'll see all these little divots in the paper towels. All those little divots increase the surface area, so it soaks things up a lot easier. And so that's what this does here in the small intestine. It sort of allows the small intestine to act like a sponge. So as the food's moving through, it's soaking up the nutrients from your food. And so, there is actually a condition that destroys the villi, damages and destroys the villi of the small intestine, and that ruins the absorption capabilities. It's called celiac disease, and it's an autoimmune disease caused by a gluten allergy. Typically, what happens is, if in some people with celiac disease, when they eat food that has gluten in it, gluten is a foreign protein. And remember that allergic reactions happen when, in the presence of foreign proteins. The body kind of freaks out to a foreign protein, and so some people when they eat gluten, when that gluten arrives in the small intestine, the immune cells in that area freak out. They kind of overreact to the presence of gluten, and they start attacking the lining of the small intestine, and it causes like inflammation and destruction of the villi. And so instead of having these projections on the wall, it sort of smooths out the lining of the small intestine, and it ruins the absorption capabilities of the small intestine. So that's kind of what happens with celiac disease. I mean, if you look up, I don't know, maybe one of you guys have a gluten allergy. I don't know. Growing up, I didn't hear a whole lot about gluten allergies, but now it's a big deal. I mean, a lot of people's, a lot of food will have right there on the label that this food is gluten free, and gluten is found in like wheat products and things like that. So it's a protein found a lot of times in wheat products, and so, but you can kind of see here on this picture, that's what happens with celiac disease. It kind of smooths out the wall of your small intestine and ruins its ability to absorb food. It's a really good picture, right? Whoops. I didn't mean to go to a website, but go to a website here. So you can kind of see right there what happens. Now, when you lose that absorption capability of your small intestine, it's going to affect a lot of different things. If you can't absorb, let's say, calcium from your food the way you're supposed to, that affects things like your bones, your teeth. That's going to affect muscle function. If you can't absorb phosphates from your food, then that's going to affect your energy levels. And so it kind of reminds me a little bit of like a vitamin D deficiency, where if you can't absorb certain things from your diet, then it's going to have a chain reaction on whatever those substances are supposed to do in the body. You're not going to be able to do those functions as well. And so that's kind of what happens with celiac disease. Here's some of the things you might see with celiac disease. It can cause tooth enamel erosion because of the lack of calcium and things like that. Joint and muscle issues because of calcium again. Stomach pain, nausea. In females, it can actually affect even your menstrual periods and your ability to carry a child or have a child. In the intestines, it can cause diarrhea, bloating. It can cause brittle nails, lactose intolerance, anemia, migraine headaches, depression, chronic fatigue, because if you can't absorb phosphate from your food, then you can't make ATP. And if you can't make ATP, then you have no energy. And so that's kind of some of the things. It's just that chain reaction of not being able to absorb things in your small intestine the way you're supposed to.
I used to work with this woman, and she I don't remember exactly what happened or how it happened to her, but she said that, like, I think she like woke up one morning and she just couldn't like walk or something. I don't remember. And like now everything she eats is gluten free, everything.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Yeah.
and she was like healthy and everything. So
It's just like, it's just like people with a peanut allergy have to avoid peanuts. A lot of times autoimmune diseases are triggered by the presence of a foreign substance that the body sort of freaks out about. That's why some autoimmune diseases are triggered by vaccination, because the vaccination, you're introducing a foreign substance into the body, and if the body kind of freaks out about it, then that can lead to an autoimmune disease. And so yeah, allergic reactions a lot of times will sort of trigger an autoimmune attack. And as long as you avoid that substance, whatever substance is making your body do that, then it's a lot better for you. But just like people with peanut allergies have to avoid peanuts, and people with shellfish allergies have to avoid shellfish, people with gluten allergies have to avoid gluten. So they look for the products. And like I said, growing up, I never even heard about gluten before. But as I got older, I started to notice that here's a little benefits of a gluten-free diet. Lowers the risk of intestinal distress. Can possibly lower death risk. Huh. And so, but yeah, it's just like, here you go. That's a really good picture right there. So notice there, I like how the nutrients are bouncing off the wall right there, because you can't absorb the nutrients from your food. It just causes that chain reaction. The small intestine is where you do 90% of your absorption. Carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, vitamins, minerals, electrolytes, salts, all those things are absorbed in the small intestine. So if you can't absorb those things, then it just causes that chain reaction that affects a lot of different aspects of the body's functioning. We was worried about our daughter when she was younger, because she was having a lot of issues with her GI tract. And so one of the things that they thought it could have been was like a gluten allergy. Turned out it wasn't, but it was one of those things they was thinking of. Oh, oops. Let's see. There's a good picture right there of all those projections that are in the wall. So that right there is a histology slide, kind of showing you really, really, really up close. That's a scanning electron microscope picture. It's showing you up close, sort of what it looks like, and all those little projections. It's just like a sponge. So as the food's moving through, it's just soaking up the nutrients. If you look at the small intestine, there's 3 sections. The first section you hear a lot about, because for a few different reasons. One, that's where bile is added from the liver and gallbladder. And that's where pancreatic juices are added from the pancreas. It's called the duodenum or duodenum. And you will hear people with different people pronounce it different ways. Duodenum is kind of like the anatomy purist way. It's like that was the original sort of pronunciation, was duodenum, and then duodenum is also an acceptable alternative pronunciation as well. And depending on who you first heard it from, or a lot of times like American doctors may pronounce it duodenum, but then like foreign doctors may pronounce it duodenum. So it's good to know both of the pronunciations, so that way when the doctor says it, you know they're probably the same thing. It's just like potato type deal. So you might hear it called duodenum, or you might hear it called duodenum. But that's the first section there. That's what's hooked up to the stomach. And so when the stomach releases food, it'll go into that little section there. It's not very long. It's just like it's kind of C-shaped, but that's where the bowel ducts are hooked up to it, and that's where the pancreatic ducts are hooked up. And so you're going to add the bile, you're going to add the pancreatic juice, you're going to mix it up by doing this back and forth sort of blending action, and then it's going to continue on. Now the second section, the jejunum, that's where most of the chemical digestion is finished, and most of the absorption takes place. Okay, so you might see that question on the lab test, like in which area of the small intestine is most of the digestion and absorption taking place? It's the jejunum. So it's kind of like you add the bile from the liver and gallbladder, and you add the pancreatic juice from the pancreas, you mix it up, and then you send it on. And as it's going through the jejunum, those enzymes and the bile and everything is working on the food, breaking it down. And as it's breaking it down, you're going to absorb it. So by the time it makes it through the jejunum, you've absorbed a good chunk of the nutrients. And then the third section is called the ileum, and you're going to keep absorbing, you're going to keep digesting and keep absorbing, and then the ileum, at the very end of the ileum, is where the entrance to the large intestine is. So you will see a question where it may have you list the sections of the small intestine in order: duodenum / duodenum, then jejunum, and then ileum. And then at the end of the ileum, there is a sphincter. Okay, so remember, you always have these sphincters between different sections of the GI tract. Sorry. So in between the throat and the esophagus, there was a sphincter. In between the esophagus and the stomach, there was a sphincter. In between the stomach and the small intestine, there was a sphincter. And then in between the small intestine and the large intestine. Now that you see the little hole right here. That's called the ileocecal valve. Okay. The reason they call it the ileocecal valve is because the last part of the small intestine is called the ileum, and the first part of the large intestine is called the cecum. So they just took those two words and put them together into one word, ileocecal. But that's the sphincter muscle that sort of regulates the movement of materials from the small intestine to the large intestine. Now, by the time it makes it through the small intestine, it's not really food anymore. It's more like it's feces. We've absorbed most of what we needed to absorb from the food. So really, most of the stuff that's coming into the large intestine is things we couldn't digest, like certain types of fibers and other materials and things like that. So it's kind of like as it goes through the small intestine, it sort of transitions into feces, and then it goes into the large intestine. Now, your large intestine does do some absorption of things like water, salts and electrolytes, and vitamins. But the primary job of the large intestine is to sort of prepare the waste product so it can exit the body. But there is a little bit of absorption that takes place there. So it's going to go through the ileocecal valve. This right here kind of talks to you about the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. It says organs that are connected to the first section of the small intestine. So as the food comes in from the stomach, you're going to add the bile, you're going to add the pancreatic juices, and then you're going to mix it up and then send it on the rest of the way. So it gives you some information here about the liver. Basically, blood is delivered to the liver, and then the blood kind of trickles out. It kind of looks like a bicycle wheel, but the blood sort of comes in through this portal vein right here, and it trickles down towards this central vein. And as it trickles down, you have cells there that are doing all the things that the liver does to blood, like detoxify it and things like that. And then one of the things we talked about before, which comes into play with digestion, is you're going to take the red blood cells, you're going to take the heme group, you're going to create bilirubin, and then you're going to use bilirubin to help you make bile. And then bile kind of drains out through these little green guys you see there and goes into these bile ducts, and then it goes out of the liver. And so that just kind of shows you that. Same picture there. This right here sort of shows you the bile duct system. So, you have two major lobes. There's actually four lobes to the liver. The other two are on the backside. But the two major lobes are called the right lobe and the left lobe. So here's the right lobe over here, and here's the left lobe. Remember, it's the patient, right? Patient's right and patient's left. Well, you have a bile duct that's sort of collecting bile from the left side, and that's called the left hepatic duct. And then you have a duct that's a tube that's collecting bile from the right lobe, and that's called the right. Now, when they merge together, this little section right here is called the common hepatic duct. Remember, common is a word we use sometimes when things merge, okay? Now, the bile will get created in the liver, and then it comes down, and it will go into the gallbladder right there. And that right there, that duct right here that connects the gallbladder, that's called the cystic duct. And I told you guys earlier that cysto is a word we use to mean bladder. It may be used for the urinary bladder, or it may be used for the gallbladder. In this situation, it's the gallbladder, but that little duct right there that connects the gallbladder to this, that's called the cystic duct. But the bile kind of goes down into the gallbladder and it accumulates, okay? Now, the liver's producing bile sort of like in a drip by drip fashion, similar to how the kidneys produce urine. The kidneys are producing urine kind of drip by drip. And just like the urinary bladder receives that urine from the kidneys and lets it build up, that's kind of what the gallbladder does. It receives the bile from the liver drip by drip, and then it lets it build up, and it lets it concentrate. And that way, when you need to, you can release large amounts of bile. Now, whenever you do release bile, let's say food comes in. So here's the stomach here, and then food comes in. So here comes in the food. It's going to arrive right there in the first section of the small intestine. That's when you're going to add bile from the liver and gallbladder. Okay, there's a duct right here. This is called the common bile duct. It's basically the place where the duct coming from, it's the place where the duct coming from the liver merges with the duct coming from the gallbladder. And so this section right here is called the common bile duct, and it takes the bile down and deposits it right there into the small intestine. So as the food's coming in, you're going to add bile to it. And then the yellow guy there is the pancreas. So you're going to add pancreatic juices through what's called and it empties in the same place. So bile and pancreatic juices are both deposited into the GI tract at the same place. It's going to mix with the food, and then you're going to move it on from there. And so that's kind of like the setup of the different ducts that you see. When you look at the PowerPoint, you can actually see the ducts. Well, I'll show you here in just a second. The gallbladder does not produce bile. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's this little sac that's connected to the liver, and it kind of rests on the underside, like the inferior portion of the liver. And its job is to receive the bile, let it build up, and let it concentrate. And you can see right here in this picture that gallbladder surgery is not a difficult surgery. It's one of the most common, easiest surgeries you can do, and it's one that doesn't really put a whole lot of stress on the patient. A lot of times when you go in for a gallbladder surgery, you leave that day. It's like outpatient surgery. But basically, the gallbladder is connected by the cystic duct right here. All you have to do is just tie that off and snip it, and remove the gallbladder. You still have bile coming down from the liver. You just can't store and concentrate bile the way you're supposed to. And that's why people that have their gallbladder removed a lot of times have to make changes in their diet to where they don't take in a lot of fat, because that's what bile does. Bile helps you to break down fat. And so if you don't have a gallbladder and you're not able to concentrate bile the way you're supposed to, if you eat a meal with a lot of fat, then it can cause things like diarrhea and stomach upset, or gastrointestinal upset and things like that. There's your pancreas also releasing his substance in the same place, right there in the duodenum. We kind of looked at a picture like this before with the pancreas, how most of the pancreas is digestion, but you'll have those little clusters of cells called the islets of Langerhans. And the islets of Langerhans are the cells that produce insulin and glucagon to help you control your blood sugar. But all these other cells, you can actually see a couple islets on this picture here. They're the lighter colored cells. All these darker colored cells are the cells that produce pancreatic juice. Pancreatic juice is kind of like a cocktail of digestive substances. There's enzymes in it. There's bicarbonate in it. So you make this little cocktail, and then you release it into the small intestine at the same place that bile is released. And so you can see right there that bile is coming down the common bile duct right there. It's going to go into the small intestine, and here's the pancreatic duct coming, and it empties in the same place. So food comes in from the stomach, you add the bile, you add the pancreatic juice, you mix it up, and then you send it on down the line. After the food goes through the small intestine, it enters the large intestine, and your large intestine goes all over your abdominal cavity. So just saying the large intestine is really not good enough. To be more precise on where, they divide it up into different sections. And so you have the cecum, you have the ascending colon, you have the transverse colon, and that's the other word you hear for large intestine, by the way, is colon. So if you see colo or colon, that's going to mean large intestine. But the large intestine starts out in the bottom right quadrant of the abdomen. That's where the food, the feces, whatever you want to call it, the materials, whatever's left of the food, is going to enter right there at the ileocecal valve. So let's kind of circle that. So there, right there. So food's coming in. And then there's a sac right here called the cecum that collects the food. And then it's going to go up towards the liver. And then it's going to go across to the spleen. And then down. And then it does a little S shape. And then it straightens out into what we call the rectum. And so basically these parts, these different sections of the large intestine are named after either what direction it's going or what the shape of it kind of. So let's kind of look at this. There's the cecum. You can see the food coming in from the small intestine. It's going to sort of collect right here in this little sac. And then the large intestine is closed on one end, so the food comes in, and this little closed-in sac right there, the cecum, is going to collect the food or the materials, the feces, whatever's left. Now, hanging off of the cecum is this little guy. That's the appendix. It looks like a little worm sticking off, or a little pinky finger. It's amazing that something that small can kill you if it ruptures. The reason why is because the appendix stores bacteria. Your colon, your large intestine, your colon is loaded with bacteria that is beneficial to us. They call it symbiotic bacteria, or you'll commonly hear it called good bacteria. We're going to talk about it a little bit later in the lecture part. But the appendix, it sort of stores bacteria. So if something should happen that wipes out the bacteria of your intestines, of your large intestine, like a bout of diarrhea, or maybe you take some antibiotics and it kind of kills the bacteria that's in your large intestine, that little collection of bacteria in your appendix can then be used to kind of reboot, to reseed the large intestine. So it kind of holds a reserve of bacteria to reseed your large intestine whenever your large intestine gets wiped out from its bacteria. So it does have a role to play. A lot of people consider it useless. I mean, you can live without it. A lot of people have had their appendix removed, right? But it's considered a part of the lymphatic system. So it kind of has a lymphatic or immune function because of its role in making sure that bad bacteria. Because one of the things that good bacteria does is it keeps the bad bacteria from taking over. And some of the bad bacteria you hear about is like E. coli, and there's this guy called Clostridium difficile that's commonly shortened up to C. diff. And they're in your gut, they're in your intestines, but your good bacteria sort of keeps them from kind of battling with each other. And so the good bacteria that's in the appendix helps to also keep the infections from occurring from the bad bacteria. But you can live without it because there's other immune cells and other lymphatic tissue in your body as well. But what happens is, if the appendix ruptures, that bacteria gets spilled into your abdominal cavity, which is called the peritoneum, and it leads to an infection in your abdomen called peritonitis, which can lead to septic shock. I mean, there's people that have died from a ruptured appendix. My brother-in-law almost died. He spent 2 weeks in the ICU because his appendix ruptured. The bacteria is good for your colon, but if it spills into your peritoneal cavity, it can cause a major infection that's a threat to your life. Something little pinky looking thing. You also hear sometimes on pictures you'll see vermiform appendix, VERMIFORM. So you might see this word from time to time, referring to it'll say vermiform appendix. That word means worm shaped. Okay, so it's like, you'll see it on like pictures and stuff. It just means that it's kind of worm shaped, like a little worm sticking off your cecum. You will see a question on the test like the appendix is attached to which region of the large intestine. That would be the first section, the cecum. That's also typically where you're going to feel pain. Whenever you have appendix issues, you'll feel it down there in the right lower quadrant. So if you feel this really bad pain down there in that area, it could be a hernia or it could be your appendix. I'd definitely get it checked out. You don't want to mess with a ruptured appendix because it is bacteria. It's just going to spill into your intestines, spill into your abdominal cavity. Once the cecum collects it, it's going to go up. Okay, they call that the ascending colon. It's going to go up towards the liver, and then it's going to make a turn. Now that turn right there is called the right colic flexor, or you'll hear it called the hepatic flexor because it's making a turn right there at the liver. Then it's going to go across towards the spleen, and that section is called transverse colon. So that's this part right there. It's going to go over to the spleen, and then it's going to make another turn, and that turn is called the left colic flexor or the splenic flexor because it's making its turn at the spleen. So it kind of goes up and then over, and then it makes another turn, and it starts going down. When it starts going down, that's called the descending colon right there. And then you see it make a little S shape. So it kind of comes down. So if I was going to draw the large intestine, I would start over here on the right side of the body. So here's a person. So there's my person there. They're facing you. So this is going to be their right and their left. I would start over on the right lower quadrant of the abdomen with my cecum and put my little appendix coming off. Then I would go up, make a little turn, go across, make another turn, come down. And then I would do a little S move like that. Okay, that little S move right there is called the sigmoid colon. And the reason they call it that is because it's shaped like an S, which is the Greek letter sigma. That's where it gets its name from. That little S turn right there. Now, after it makes this little S turn, it's going to straighten out. And the Latin word for straight is rectus. Okay, you may remember that from A&P1 because you had some muscles that had rectus in their name, like rectus abdominis and rectus femoris. Recto or rectus means straight. Same root word as erect. Same root word as rectangle because they're straight angles. Same root word as let's rectify this. It means to straighten it out, right? And so that's kind of what that's why that area is called the rectum, is because after you do that S shape, it straightens out. It becomes straight. And that's, by the time it reaches there, it's feces. And so as it's going through the large intestine and goes through those different sections, you're absorbing water, you're absorbing salt and electrolytes, you're absorbing vitamins, okay, and you're sort of concentrating the waste product into feces or stool, and it's going to make its way to the rectum, and it's going to be held there until you're ready to let it out. If you look up close at the very, very end of the GI tract, that's where the rectum's at. It leads to an opening back there called the anus. And the word anus, by the way, means ring, like a ring. Because when you look at it, it's a little ring down there. I always thought it was funny because anus and annual use the same root word. It means ring. Annual kind of means you go around the year, or the planets make a ring around the sun, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of where the word annual comes from the same root word as anus. It just means ring. But the stool is going to get held there. How long? That's up to you. Usually up to you. But there's a sphincter muscle right at the very end of the GI tract that you control. And we eliminate the drawing there. This little sphincter here is the very last sphincter of the GI tract. So this is the one that holds feces in your body. That's called the external anal sphincter, and that's a potty training muscle. Okay, and so you have to learn how to control that as a kid. That's why kids wear diapers, and then you potty train them, and they learn how to hold it, and then let it go when they want to. But that's a voluntary muscle. Usually the external anal sphincter is closed. Stool arrives there, starts pressing on it. That's when you get the urge. They have to go use the bathroom, and then you go use the bathroom, relax that muscle, and out it comes. You have some mucus glands in the anal area that produce mucus to lubricate the stool as it's coming out. There's also other muscles that help out with pooping. I like this guy over here, the levator ani muscle. It elevates the anus when you poop, and so it's going to be involved in pooping. So you're going to contract some muscles down there to push it out, and then you relax the external anal sphincter to let it out. So actually on this test, you have both potty training muscles. Back with the urinary anatomy, it was the external urethral sphincter. And then with this one, it's the external anal sphincter. And then you let the stool out, and out it goes. I think this is really, actually, I'll show you something here in just a second. I want to show it to you. I want you to pay attention. You see these little constricting parts right there on the rectum? Where you see little wrinkles right there? That's actually places where the inside wall has these little outcroppings right here. You can see one right there on that picture. That's called a rectal valve. I'm going to show it to you on the PowerPoint and tell you a little story about that. So let's go to the PowerPoint and just kind of recap stuff. So, this is one of the things you definitely want to have, the PowerPoint here. You want to have it up, ready to go when you take your lab test. And it's got good information on it. It's got the teeth information there. It's got some information about the salivary glands over there on the right side that you can use to answer questions. And these are the pictures that I'll use. I just take these pictures, throw them over to the test, and say what structure's highlighted. There's the esophagus. There's the lower esophageal sphincter. I know it's kind of hard to see, but that highlights it right there at the junction where the esophagus meets the stomach. Then you got your stomach. There's the gastric folds, and then it goes through the different sections of the stomach. There's the sphincter between the stomach and small intestine. There's a picture of the small intestine, but then it kind of goes through the three sections there. So there's the duodenum/duodenum. If you look right here, that's the pancreas hooked up. The pancreas sits right there in that little curve. And so he's adding his pancreatic juice as the food's coming in from the stomach. He's going to add his secretions. Also, bile is coming down from the liver and gallbladder. And actually, a picture, there's the jejunum, there's the ileum. But there's a picture here. There's the liver, gallbladder, there's the bile ducts, but there's a better picture right here. If you blow this picture up, whoops, you can actually see the bile ducts coming from the liver and the pancreas and gallbladder. So, here's the liver. This little thing right there, that's the gallbladder. They've just cut into it, sliced it. And then here's your pancreas. And you can see, use a different color. Here is the hepatic ducts right there. This is called the common hepatic duct. Right here coming from the gallbladder is the cystic duct. And they merge together. And this right here is called the common bile duct. And he deposits bile right there into the duodenum or duodenum. And then right here is the pancreatic duct. That's collecting pancreatic juice from the pancreas. And then it also deposits right there in the same area. And actually, if you look closely, it's kind of hard to see, but you actually see the opening right there where the bile comes in and the pancreatic juice comes in. That's a really good picture there showing you that. And you have, there's a animation of it. Then you have your sections of the large intestine, the cecum. There's the appendix hanging off of it. I know it's really hard to see, but down there at the bottom, there's a little, right there, a little highlighted, little worm-looking thing, a little pinky-looking thing. Something that small can kill you. Ain't that crazy? Something that small, if it ruptures and spills that bacteria out into your abdomen. You got the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid, and then the rectum. Now, this is a really good picture here about those rectal valves. So right here, in the rectum, you have these little outcroppings of the inside wall, and they're called rectal valves. And their purpose, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like the body has everything it could possibly need. The purpose of these little outcroppings of tissue is to hold stool in your body while you pass gas. And so basically your body's going to produce gas in the colon because of the bacteria that's, in the colon. They produce these different gases. And so it's like, your body is going to have to release gas out there, And I don't care who you are, guys, the average person farts 8 times a day. And if you hold it all day long, it just comes out in your sleep while you're sleeping. But you're going to fart. It's just, it's a bodily function. A lot of people say that. Well, what these little valves do is make sure you don't shart. I love that. The whole purpose of these little outcroppings is to keep you from sharting. It allows you to pass gas, but not soil yourself. The body has everything it needs, even little things like that. So you can think your rectal valves. I always think also what's funny is rectal valves. When you think about valves, you think about like a lot of valves relieve pressure. And so that's kind of what these rectal valves do. They allow your body to relieve pressure without causing a messy situation. Body's so amazing. It has everything it needs. Even structures that keep you from pooping on yourself when you have to pass gas. And there's the anal opening. All right, lab report. Let's do that. Pull that up right here. So here's the lab report. Let me try to get the first 5. All right, so it says, what are the 2 forms of digestion? And then describe each, and just a brief description, nothing big. And then give examples. So one type is called mechanical digestion. That's the physical breakdown of food. And so, for examples, you can put your teeth, biting, ripping, tearing, crushing, grinding the food. You can put the tongue because it sort of massages the food into an easily swallowable form. And then you can put the stomach and the grinding / sort of churning action that the stomach performs. All those are parts of mechanical. And then you have what's called chemical digestion, which is where you use substances, different substances to break down food. And there's quite a few different examples you can put there. You got, you got saliva. Oh, here we go. Okay, saliva. I can't write. You've got stomach acid. You've got bile, pancreatic juice. All those are examples of chemical digestion. That would be things like enzymes, acid, and we're going to talk about these guys. When we get to the lecture at 1 o'clock, we're going to talk about what each one of those things do and what's in them and how they kind of assist with digestion. So you got mechanical, the physical breakdown of food. Your teeth, your tongue, your stomach do that. Chemical is the use of substances to break down food, like saliva, acid, bile, pancreatic juice. And there's others, but that's good enough. Number 2, a typical person begins with 20 baby teeth, 10 on the top, 10 on the bottom. And they are replaced by 32 adult teeth, 16 on the top, 16 on the bottom. And that includes your wisdom teeth. So your wisdom teeth are part of that 32. So I'm down to 28. I had all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed. Let's see. And they're by the way, the wisdom teeth are the last permanent teeth to come in, right? They come in like in your late teens, early 20s. I think I had my wisdom teeth taken out when I was like 19 or 20. My 18-year-old daughter had hers taken out a few months ago. Let's see. Upper teeth are called maxillary because they insert into the upper jaw, the maxilla. And then the lower teeth are called mandibular because they insert into the mandible. And then the largest pair of salivary glands are the ones right here in your cheek beside your ear. That's called the parotid gland. All right, so that's 1 through 5. Yeah, the alligator clamp's working pretty good, but it's still allowing it to come undone a little bit. So I have to fix that a little. See what else I can do with that. Everybody good? 1 through 5?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's move on down. We can fit these. We can fit 6, 7, 8, 9 on here. All right. So the pair of salivary glands that produce the most saliva is the gleeking gland underneath your tongue. There we go. Sorry. Submandibular. So this is the one that's kind of underneath your jawbone right there, and they release underneath the tongue. That's the gleeking gland, submandibular. The teeth, tongue, and salivary glands create an easily swallowable ball. It's called a bolus. That's what gets swallowed and goes down your esophagus into your stomach. The opening in the diaphragm that allows the esophagus to go through it is called the esophageal hiatus. And when organs poke up, when abdominal organs poke up through that hole, it's called a hiatal hernia. It's usually the stomach. It could be the liver. Happens sometimes with pregnancy. When the uterus is expanding because of the baby, it'll kind of push up on organs, and actually can push organs up through that little hole there. And then number 9 is which sphincter muscle is associated with heartburn? It's called the lower esophageal sphincter. And then it's also called the cardiac sphincter because it's there at the entrance to the stomach, which is called the cardia. So the lower esophageal sphincter or the cardiac sphincter. Good there?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, clear that off. Head on down. Let's try to fit. Man, I can't really fit those. You did that one, right? So right here, 10, 11, 12. Let's do 10, 11, 12. It just says list the 4 regions of the stomach. So the entrance is called the The entrance is called the cardia. Then you have the rounded top, which is called the fundus. And the main part of the stomach is called the body. And then the narrow part at the end, the distal part of the stomach, is called the pylorus. There we go, pylorus, the gatekeeper. That's where food gets stopped, and then you release it little by little. All right, the 3 layers of muscles in the stomach from superficial to deep. That means you go from outside in. The most superficial is called, I just got to not press as hard, longitudinal layer. And those fibers are kind of oriented in a vertical direction. Then you have the middle layers called the circular layer. And they're oriented this direction like that. And then the innermost or the deepest layer is called the oblique layer because those fibers are oriented in a sort of a diagonal fashion. So it's kind of like 1, 2, 3. So that goes from superficial to deep. Now having all those muscles kind of arranged in different directions allows your stomach to do all kinds of different directional contractions to help grind the food up. Sorry. What is the function of gastric folds? They allow expansion. Gosh, dog it. Yeah, definitely the alligator clamps are starting to fall apart. I got to be very careful. If I write really, really light, it doesn't do it. But if I press down with my hand, it does. Allow expansion of stomach to accommodate large amounts of food. I feel like I'm spelling this wrong. There's 2 M's, right? Accommodate.
Yeah.
Okay. You can't even read it anyways, can you? Allow expansion of the stomach to accommodate large amounts of food. So I don't know when your next large meal is. You know, it could be this weekend. Mother's Day's coming up. Memorial Day's coming up. 4th of July in a couple months. You know, some of these holidays where we eat huge amounts of food. That's where the gastric folds are going to come into play to allow you to eat like 7 hamburgers and 14 hot dogs and stuff like that. I always wondered about those like competitive eaters that can eat ridiculous amounts of food. You got to think about that. How big, you know, how big is their stomach when they get done eating like 37 hot dogs in 10 minutes? All right. And then the number 13 is which sphincter is between the stomach and small intestine. It's called the pyloric sphincter, Pyloric. That's the sphincter that holds food in your stomach and then releases the food little by little. Okay. Every time I move my bed, I lean forward. All right, let's do these. Shut up. All right, food leaving the stomach is an acidic paste called chyme. Chyme, chyme. The CH makes a K sound. List 4, there's actually 5 I can think of. Anatomical characteristics of the small intestine that make it really good at its job. One is the length. It's very long. That way food stays in it for a long time. And that gives you a chance to absorb everything you need to. Then you have the fact that it twists and turns a lot. That slows down food as well. So the fact that it's convoluted, has a lot of twists and turns. And then you have all those folds that are in the wall. The big folds are called circular folds. And then on those are smaller projections called villi. And then on the villi are even smaller projections called microvilli. So it's like the first two things increase the amount of time that food stays in the small intestine. And then the last three increase the surface area, which increases the absorption capabilities. The liver produces bile. A lot of people make that mistake. A lot of people think the gallbladder produces, okay? The liver is the one who produces the bile. The gallbladder's job is to store and concentrate it. That's why you can live without a gallbladder. Yes, it can affect your ability to digest fat because that's what bile helps to do, but it's not a vital organ. The liver is definitely a vital organ. It does a lot of things that no other organ does. And so there's those. Move on down. And let's see how many we can fill in the next one. Now we can do these three. Merging of the hepatic duct with the cystic duct forms the common bowel duct. And the reason they call it the common bowel duct is because it conducts bile from both the liver and the gallbladder. Bile and pancreatic juice are secreted into what region of the small intestine? That would be the duodenum or duodenum. And then the sphincter muscle between the small intestine and large intestine is called the ileocecal valve. It's where the ileum, the last region of the small intestine, hooks up with the cecum, the first region of the large intestine. It's hard sometimes to talk about the intestines because you got to say small intestine, large intestine, small intestine, large intestine. So 17 is common bowel duct, 18 is duodenum / duodenum, and then 19 is ileocecal valve. And then we can fit the last four together. Actually, 24 is you can just copy and paste something to there. I'll show you that. I'll show you where that is. All right. The appendix is attached to which region of the large intestine? That would be the cecum, the first section. Another name for the right colic flexor is the hepatic flexor because it turns at the liver. And then another name for the left hepatic flexor is splenic because it makes its turn at the spleen. So when you start out with the large intestine, it goes up and then over and then down. The flexors are the 90-degree turns here and here. And right here is where the liver is going to be. And then right there is where the spleen is going to be. And then it's going to come down, do its little S shape, and straighten out. The type of epithelium is simple. And right there, anytime you see simple epithelium, it's really good for absorption. Okay, it's simple columnar. And so what it is basically is it's one layer of tall cells that kind of look like this. Simple columnar. Those little dots are the nuclei down at the bottom. All right, for the last one, let me unplug this guy one last time because he's driving me crazy. Let's see. For number 24, if you go to the checklist document, so the checklist document is this right here. If you go down to the bottom, you can just copy this right there, the flow of food through the GI tract. And then that's what question number 24 is. It says draw a flow chart of the GI tract starting with the oral cavity and ending with the anus. Include the 3 regions of the small intestine and the different regions of the large intestine. So you can just paste that right there. So you go from the oral cavity to the throat, pharynx, then from the pharynx to the esophagus. The esophagus takes the food down to the stomach. And then from the stomach, it's going to enter the small intestine. And there's 3 regions. And that's what the SI means, by the way. SI, small intestine. So it's going to go through the duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Then it's going to go into the large intestine. It's going to start out the cecum, go up the ascending colon, go across the transverse colon, down the descending colon, into the sigmoid where it does a little S shape, and it straightens out into the rectum. And at the very end of the rectum is the anus. And like I said, you will see a question where you've kind of fill in the blank with regards to the flow. So really, that checklist, I think if you want to have the checklist up, you can. The information though from the checklist is also on the PowerPoint and on your lab report. So I think if you just have the PowerPoint and the lab report up and ready for your digestive system, it'll help you answer all the digestive questions. But what I did was, so we got about 13 minutes or so. We got time. Let's talk about the lab test. Oh, by the way, go ahead. Turn in the lab report we just finished. I don't understand sometimes. Like I'll give you the answers. We'll fill out the lab report, and then people wait like a week and a half to turn it in. And I'm like, why? Just submit it. Get it over with. I actually saw that with the ABG homework. The ABG homework that we did on Monday or Tuesday, right? We did the ABG homework on Tuesday. Some people haven't turned it in yet. I'm like, why? I gave you the answers. You just submit it, get it over with. That's 20 points. I don't know why people wait. It's always kind of weird, but just turn it in. And one less thing to worry about. You don't want to forget about it. Maybe it's because it's not due until May 2nd, and maybe I don't know. Maybe some of you guys have like a reminder system to remind you like when it gets close to a due date. But if something's done, just turn it in, just submit it. Get it out the way and one less thing to worry about. So, in between the break, just submit the lab report. If you haven't done, turn it in. Submit the ABG homework, turn it in, get it done. And over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be grading like crazy so that you guys have an idea of where you stand when you go into the the final. All right, lab module 3. Let's go into there. The test will open up at 2 o'clock. There's the 3 labs that are going to be on the test. So you'll find answers in those labs if you need it. But I also made a folder here that says notes and resources for lab exam 3. Basically, if you have these things in front of you or available to you, when you start the lab exam, then you should be good to go. Now, you can still prepare, look over the labs, review the PowerPoints, review your lab reports, and know where the information is. So that way, when you come across a question, you can find it pretty easily. You can group like your digestive stuff here, and put your analysis information somewhere else, and that way, whenever you get to those questions, you just go to that information and find it. But this is the stuff right here in this folder, notes and resources. Here are the things you want to have with you whenever you go to take your lab exam. Now, the lab exam, you've got 3 hours to answer 50 questions. That should be plenty of time to answer them all. I'm not worried about the lab report, and really you shouldn't be either. Or I'm not worried about the lab exam, and you shouldn't be either, because I think it's going to be very, very easy. You just find the answers. The only part where that doesn't apply is where you have to diagnose a person based on your analysis results. But still, it's not very hard. If you have the symptoms and conditions sheet up, you just find the condition that matches all the the symptoms. But here's the things you want to have up. Okay, you want to have your lab reports in front of you, because I just moved questions over. So have your urinary anatomy lab report with you. Have that case study lab report with you, and then the digestive anatomy lab report. You don't need to have the report that where you recorded your urinalysis. You don't need that. But the case study part. And so, print those off or have them there. You have them completed already, right? It does say filled out. And so have those lab reports filled out in front of you, and you should be able to find a lot of answers just from your lab reports. You can have the checklists up. There's a urinary system anatomy checklist there, and there's a digestive anatomy checklist right there. So you can have both of those up if you want to. I don't think the checklists are necessary, but because the two things really what you need the urinary anatomy checklist for is the flow chart for urine flow down here at the bottom, right there. And you also have that on your lab report. So if you have your urinary anatomy lab report in front of you, you don't really need that checklist. And then the checklist for digestive anatomy, which I showed you guys earlier, all this information, like right here, this information about number of teeth and this information about each of the salivary glands, that's on the PowerPoint. So if you have your PowerPoint up, you should be able to find that information. And then this right here, we just transferred it, to number 24 on your lab report. So really, I don't think the checklists are that important. But you want to have your lab reports with you, and you want to have these PowerPoints. So the PowerPoints, anytime you see a picture, there's two PowerPoints. There's a urinary anatomy PowerPoint, and there's a digestive anatomy PowerPoint. So when you see a picture on the test, just go to the PowerPoint and find that picture, and then just type in the answer. Very easy. So those are all the things you should have up. Your lab reports and the PowerPoint. So you can have like one tab with the test, one tab with the PowerPoint, and just when you see a picture, go to the PowerPoints, look it up, and enter your answer. Can't make it much more easier than that, guys. Like I said, I think everybody, if you don't get a perfect score on the lab report, you should get a very, very, very high score. You might miss a question or two. That does happen. But I've been surprised sometimes by people not doing very well. I'm like, how? It's all right there. The only thing that's not directly given to you is the urinalysis stuff. It's just like the case studies. I provide you with information, and you use this sheet, the symptoms and conditions, to help diagnose the person. So maybe you see a question like, Johnny is a 10-year-old boy. He's been experiencing weight loss, increased appetite, increased drinking, increased urination. Here is your dipstick results. He's got clear urine, or he's got colorless urine. He's got a high specific gravity. He's got a low pH. He's got glucose in his urine. He's got ketones in his urine. What do you think he has? You know what I mean? And you just find the condition that matches all those. So a lot of times the first thing that's given to you is the color. And so go to, if it says dark brown or Coca-Cola urine, it's going to be one of these things. And then you go to the specific gravity or whatever, and whichever one agrees with that list, and you keep seeing the same ones over and over again, then that's the answer. So it's just like your case study. It's not hard. You just find the condition that matches what you're seeing and what results you got. But it'll be like that. You got a 30-year-old male. He's got these symptoms. You run the urinalysis. Here's the results. What do you think he has? Yeah, the lab test is not difficult. As long as you have everything in front of you, you should do very well. You got plenty of time. 3 hours. Now, you don't have to take all 3 hours. That's up to you. but you have 3 hours to answer 50 questions. Now, once that 3 hours is up, it will automatically submit your test. So make sure that you have all the questions answered by the time limit. But the lab test, I would recommend, if possible, I would recommend doing the lab test this weekend. It's not hard. There's not a whole lot of preparation that you have to do. I mean, just, get it done, get it over with, and you should do very well. And that way you can spend more time preparing for the lecture test. Because I would say that the lecture test requires some more prep time. One, because you don't have as much time to answer questions. And also, you have the ABG stuff where you're going to have to think about stuff a little bit, typically. So the lecture test is one that you want to definitely be ready to take before you go in. I would treat the lecture test like any other test. Prepare for it, do the practice quizzes, do the Kahoot game, get all your stuff, get all your notes ready, and then and we're going to talk about that when we get back from break. We're going to talk about like the strategy that you want to use for the lecture test. Lab test, have all the stuff ready, start the test, find the answers, put the answers in. I don't think you'll have a problem. The lab exam is going to be right here when it does open up. So if you go into lab exam 3, just below, or lab module 3, just below that folder with the resources, there's the exam. Must be completed by May 9th. I mean, so you can take it today if you want, or you can wait till May 9th. I don't care. It's just got to be done by May 9th. Now, it does have to be completed in one attempt, which means when you start it, you can't leave and go back and leave and go back. Once you start it, you have to finish it within that 3-hour time period. And so that's what it means by must be completed in one attempt or one sitting. Once you start the test, you've got to finish it. You can use whatever you want: open notes, open resources, PowerPoint, whatever. Now, but some students like to use Google to answer questions and stuff like that, which is fine. But just remember that the questions are based on the labs we did. So you should be able to find the answers to all the questions in the labs, whether it be the lab reports or whether it be the PowerPoints. But if you want to use the internet, you can use the internet. I don't care. The one thing, this is not set up for lockdown browser, which means don't go into the lockdown browser to take it. I don't think it will let you take it. Like if you go through the lockdown link, the little lock on your computer or whatever, if you go into the lockdown link and then go to Blackboard and click on the test, I think it says test is not available or something. I don't know. But you don't want to use the lockdown browser for the test. You just go into Blackboard like you normally would, and then just click on it. We'll pull it up. That way you can go to other websites and stuff if you want to, or pull up other stuff in the different tabs as you take it. So do not use lockdown browser. Understand?
Yes.
It's a really good chance to get, like I said, I would expect it's a 100-point test. Now, like I said, I expect most people to get a very, very, very good score. You might miss a question, but there's really no reason why you shouldn't get an A on the lab test, because it's set up. It's set up for it. Like I said, you have the PowerPoint. You see a picture, go to the PowerPoint, find the picture that matches the one on the test, and the answer's right there at the top. Make sure you spell it correctly. It's very, very easy. All right. When we get back from break, what we'll do is we'll do chapter 26. I emailed you the notes, didn't I, yesterday? Chapter 26 note pages. I feel like I did. If you don't have those printed off, though, print them off between now and 1. We'll do the digestive physiology notes, and then we'll be done with that, and we'll talk about the lecture test during the 1 o'clock class. All right, I'll see you back at 1.
Thank you.
Thank you.